system, because the prevailing view now is, which is interesting. It is quite an interesting thought, but it is the view that economy is a self-organizing system. And this view has been developed by Hayek, who is a very intelligent economist, and now people, they have been stricken by this idea, and that even people who try to find some new ways, still they are so impressed by this idea of self-organizing economy that they are not able to see another way of dealing with that. There is an interesting book which has been written by Jean-Pierre Dupuy about the future of the economy. Jean-Pierre Dupuy is a French scientist who is planning, who is also teaching at Stanford University. He has written a book about the future of the economy. And what is interesting is that he seems to accept this idea of a self-organizing economy and considers that it is also a self-transcendent system, that the economy might generate its own transcendent goal by itself. But this view is not realistic at all. It is clear that we need to rely upon a self-organizing system for many activities which do not require major decisions. But when we are considering many major decisions, such as the environment protection, then we cannot rely upon that, because there is no reason why an economy operating by itself without any specific goals would spontaneously evolve towards the preservation of the environment. It won't operate in that way. We have still a Darwinian view, which is a view of a system where the society evolves only through competition. But now, as human beings have no real competitors in nature, it means that we are able now to destroy everything, and at the end it will happen. There will be a collapse, as it has been described for many peoples in the past, except that now it might be a collapse at the world scale level.
Alors, on y va. 10 macro scenarios for a little stardust. So it is a kind of joke, because planet Earth is very little. You have vision of Hubble of the planet Earth, where you see the planet as a little stardust. At scale, it seems crazy to think at the planetary level. But if you take a cosmic point of view, the planet is just very little thing. That explains my title, 10 macro scenarios for a little stardust. Mankind is really the result of a very long evolution. Why this presentation? This presentation is a result of 30 years of speaking with different groups on purple future is difficult. Either they are assimilated by the red and the blue, either they are pushed in beige and black suicide. So, it is why the preservation of purple indigenous people is so important. It is because they are really in danger. The other thing I will say, which is very important and which is also an answer to Solène, it is that in these indigenous people, you have, of course, people who are purple, but you have people, because they evolved during all this very long period time of million years, you have people, certain of those tribes are maybe integral. You have tribes who are more evolved than actually orange people. They are stuck in a purple style of life, but their culture, in certain cases, have evolved largely more than just a purple future. We will see this. It is a fact that also when we think in terms of spiral dynamic, we have to think in terms of fractal. And that even in the Middle Age, you have already people who was systemic, who was very evolved inside the Middle Age. Those yellow people are the first to say, okay, but if we look at the reality, if we analyze the reality scientifically as system and subsystem, we should say scientifically, and we observe that there are no economy without a healthy society, and there are no healthy society, human society, without a healthy ecosystem. And that is brought by the analysis. I have finished.
Okay, well, thank you, Michel. So first, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Alexandre Roger. I have been working for quite a number of years in applied research in the area of energy and sustainable development with an R&D company called IFP. Now I have left this activity, but I'm still continuing teaching activities, and also I'm animating a think tank called IDE in the area of energy and sustainable development, but it is quite a wide area. We are interested also in the way people live, transport themselves, and therefore it is open to many issues. But dealing with this energy issue, I had the feeling that if we want to bring solutions, we have to consider a wider view, more integral view, and therefore I had some thoughts about this bigger picture, larger view, taking into account all the interactions with the environment, raw materials, and pollution, and about a little more than 1 year ago, I wrote a book concerning the future in French called L'avenir en question. Earlier, I had written a book about energy and climate, which had been translated in English, and which had been published by Wiley. If you are interested, we can circulate the two books so you can have a look. And more recently, as I mentioned, I think already yesterday, I got more and more interested in future studies. We had this interaction also within the Design Me a Planet. And for me, really, the future is a central issue, because now I think that we are at a critical time where there are big changes. And to a large extent, I'm surprised by the fact that these long-term issues are not really considered as they should be in companies at the political level. And I have been working more in this area. And compared to my previous book, I have found that we still need to have an even wider view, and therefore what I'm going to present now is a summary of what I have prepared for my last book, not yet published, but hopefully, which will be hopefully published by the end of the year. And here is this presentation, Shaping the Future and Anticipating the Disruptions of Tomorrow. And what I'm going to explain, to show, is that presently we are facing a crisis. We are quite aware in Europe of the environment, of the economic crisis. We also can see that there is an environmental crisis. But beyond that, I believe that we have a worldview crisis. And this is the point of view I'm developing in this last book, and which I shall summarize right now. So I shall start by presenting this worldview crisis as I see it, very briefly. Then I shall present the evolution we have observed in our world, starting from boundless confidence in science and technology, which arose during the Renaissance in Europe, and reaching now a period of doubt. And therefore, I'm going to discuss that, how we shifted from boundless confidence to the era of doubt. And finally, I shall present some views about the future. The future, I don't know what it will be, and I won't be able to observe what will happen, and therefore, for me, it is still uncertain. But there are different possible futures. There is a pessimistic view. There is also a more optimistic view. I'm not choosing between the two. I'm just saying that we certainly have to behave as if the optimistic view might prevail and do our best to make this more successful future happen. Okay, well, first, this worldview crisis, I will discuss 3 points. First, the failing perception of the future. The fact that presently I feel that there is a lack of vision of the future. This is something we can easily observe in Europe, and well, in other countries, in emerging countries like China, there is a more optimistic view concerning the future, certainly. But on the other hand, in China, for instance, there is no really an alternative model which is presented to the model we have in Europe, and which is encountering its limits now. Then I shall tell you a few words about the world representation, how our worldview governs the evolution of the whole system, and I shall briefly summarize what is the present situation in terms of a crisis. I start by a failing perception of the future by just observing that in the past, just after the year, in the 50s and the 60s, there was a lot of optimism about the future, especially in the Occidental world, of course. And that in that period, there were many utopias, quite optimistic utopias, which were imagined. And then there was a break. In 1972, the Meadows report publication was quite an event, and in fact it was quite a far-saying report, but it was considered by most people as too pessimistic. Many people said that it is wrong, but in fact now if we consider what was written really in the document of Meadows' report, it was quite right in anticipating many problems. I think that there is even a problem which at that time was not assessed really, which was the issue of climate change, which was not really properly assessed. So to a large extent, I think now that the threats we have to deal with are even more pregnant and stronger than at the time of the Meadows report. And then, well, during the years the 70s and the 80s, what happened is that, in fact, there was this neoliberal movement. The Eastern Bloc failed. There was a crash of this system, and therefore some people considered, as Fukuyama said, that it is the end of history, that now we have really achieved the end of all this. We have this liberal system which can be governed by itself, and that therefore we need no more any big stories. And therefore, if we need no big stories, if the economics evolve naturally, without any need of something thinking about the future, then we need no vision about the future. And in fact, what I have observed in industry companies and even at the state level, at the political level, is that the vision about the future has become very, very poor. And now in the years 2000, perhaps we are observing a comeback of the future. And I think that we observe this comeback of the future mainly through the climate change issues. Because when we consider climate change in this area, there is something which is very significant. It's the fact that to a large extent we can predict what will happen. It is very difficult to predict the future. Most people consider that it is impossible, and they are certainly right when we consider political events. But when we consider issues referring to the planet, such as climate change, then the situation is different, because we can use very good models which can predict the evolution of the system. And therefore, now we have models which tell us that if we do nothing, if we behave like now, there is a major risk of an ecological crisis, and we have to face it. Now, concerning the evolution of the world system, I have this picture which I have found personally quite helpful for analyzing the situation. To a large extent, presently, everything is concentrated around the technical and economic system. To a large extent, we have the feeling now that our civilization is really a technical and economic system, and that we need nothing else. But in fact, we cannot rely only upon this very limited view, because this technical and economic system interacts with the environment. And of course, this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and this is the issue, in fact, which I considered in my previous book. But I think this is not enough. If we want the situation to change, really, at world scale, we need an evolution of our representation model. Because, in fact, all the decisions which are taken by people who are in charge, in companies or at the level of states, in fact, are taken in terms of a certain representation of the world. And therefore, I think that this is something which is really crucial for the future, and this is what I'm trying to show today, and that we can discuss later on. And the representation, the worldview, in fact, is formed within a certain representation framework, and this representation framework, it includes areas of knowledge, includes areas of science, of all areas which give us a picture, scientific picture of the world as it is. It includes also all our views, all our cultural views, which are of course very important for shaping our worldview. And there is also a vertical axis, which is an axis of values. And for me it is quite clear that these values, they cannot be included just in the plane of material events. We have to base these values of some kind of transcendent, spiritual, moral values.
The third dimension.
Third dimension. Vertical dimension. And therefore, our present crisis can be described at these three levels. First, it can be described at the economic and financial level as an economic and financial crisis. It can be described at the environmental level as an ecological crisis, and it can be described at this worldview level as a worldview crisis. And I think that this worldview crisis is really essential for shaping our future. And really the question is to know what we can do for framing a new worldview. So now I'm going to the second part of the presentation, which is describing briefly, it will be of course very short because there are many issues which are involved and which we have to discuss, how we shifted from a boundless confidence to an era of doubt. And well, I won't mention all these points because I will discuss them just now, but the general ideas is summarized by a question mark, but in fact I'm not sure the question mark should remain, because for me there is really a problem. Isn't our civilization, which stemmed from the Renaissance, founded upon reason, science and technology, in a dead end? Haven't we a real problem with this model and with this world view, which made the success of the European and Occidental world, but which is now encountering its limits? And this is something I shall briefly discuss now. Concerning the technology, we are, of course, every day stricken by its progress, and we can see this progress mainly in the computer area. Still, I think we need to point out the fact that this very rapid progress in the computer area is not found in other areas. In the areas of energy, in the areas of materials transformation, the progress is much slower now, and perhaps we are already reaching some asymptotes, some limits of our industrial model. Therefore, the expansion of technology, as we can observe it in the computers area, and which is illustrated by the Moore's law, does not really reflect the reality of the world as we can observe now. And in fact, when we consider what has happened, some years ago there was a tremendous optimism about the cognitive capitalism, about the transformation that numerical technology might introduce in the economy. And to a large extent, what we can observe is a failure of this cognitive capitalism. I do not mean by saying that the numerical technologies we have are not wonderful, are not useful. But I just want to mention the fact that the main use of these numerical technologies has been through finance, through very rapid growth of financial exchanges, and what we can observe now is an overgrown virtual economy, which is completely artificial and which has grown at a dimension which is about 40 times the real economy. And of course, it is easy to understand that it is not a very viable situation. And at the same time, what we can observe is that instead of bringing more progress in terms of justice and improvement of life in society, what we can observe is that this cognitive capitalism, especially developed in the US, has led to more irresponsibility and inequality, and it has led also to financial growth. On the other hand, in the area of environment, what we can see is that we are still progressing in the over-exploitation of natural resources. We still have to deal with endangered ecosystems and biodiversity. Global warming is not at all solved. The problem is getting worse and worse. And of course, there have been some progresses in terms of consciousness. There are the ideas of sustainable development which have been put forward, but we can now also find out that there are quite strong limits to what can be done within this framework of sustainable development, because really environment preservation is incompatible with profit logic at the world scale. What happens is that now in the world system, all countries are competing, United States, China, Europe is competing worse, but all these countries, they are competing with a profit logic, and therefore, well, some people, some companies can make some efforts, especially if it brings them some profit, but still there is this contradiction between environment preservation and this profit logic, and this is something which we can observe in the case of global warming, because really nobody at the world level wants to accept to support the costs which are required for preserving the environment and avoiding global warming. Europe is certainly the region of the world which is most conscious of that, but its contribution to global warming is very limited, about 10% of all emissions of greenhouse gases, and therefore it's not Europe which will bring a solution to the world problems. And finally, this is directly linked to worldview. We have the difficulty of having a global worldview due to the fact that there are diverging representations, because in order for the economy to become more efficient, people are relying more and more on specialization, and therefore there are very different worldviews when we consider scientific approaches, when we consider economic approaches, or when we consider sociological approaches. All these people have a different worldview, and all these representations now in fact are diverging, and it is very difficult to have an overall worldview which could be accepted by most people on the planet, and which might help them to drive the efforts. And furthermore, what we can observe is that there is a real difficulty in finding some reference for values which would be accepted for everybody, which means that we have extended all our efforts in the horizontal plane, but we have the feeling to live kind of flat world where the vertical axis is not really developed, and we have lost much of our references to these vertical values. Now, what can happen in the future? Until now, I haven't presented a very optimistic view, and I'm not very optimistic, in fact. But well, as I mentioned from the beginning, we do not know what will happen exactly, and we can just make efforts to make things happen in the best possible way. And now we can really wonder if we are able to master the increasing complexity of our system, if it will be possible to reach the right solutions for mastering the difficulties we have to face it, especially in the environmental area. And therefore, perhaps we are moving towards very hard times, but still, we can hope that either we can avoid these dark ages, or that perhaps a solution might emerge later on. At this point, I would like to show you a graph which I find quite interesting, which has been published in a very recent issue of Nature, the Nature journal, which is quite a well-known scientific journal. Nature published several articles which were related to Rio Plus 20. They presented some summary reports, and this graph has been published in one of his recent issues of Nature. You see it's Nature June 2012, so it is quite recent. What they present here is that we can really fear that at the environmental level, a major shift a major disruption might occur before 2050. And in fact, they relate this possible disruption to a very simple ratio. This ratio is a fraction of the land area occupied for human activity. Fraction of land occupied for human activities, it includes all dwellings, all houses, towns, and also all the area which is used for agricultural activities. And the idea behind this graph is that the ecosystems are resilient, but they are resilient up to a certain point, and that if we exceed a certain level, there may be a certain breakdown of the ecosystem, and that this breakdown might occur at a very global level. And in fact, what they are saying is that above a ratio of 0.5, I mean, if more than 50% of the land is occupied for human activities, the risk of this breakdown is significantly increasing. And you see here, it's interesting to show how the percentage of affected ecosystems evolved during the years. You see that in 1950, not so long ago, it was only quite a minor part, it was about a quarter, and now we have reached almost 50%. I think it is 43% now. And when we exceed this ratio, when we exceed this 50% ratio, well, what we say is that a critical transition might occur, you see, with a breakdown of the complexity of the ecological system, and of course, at the same time, human activities will also break down, and the impact of human activities on the environment would become much less, and of course, the environment then could be restored further. If we translate this in terms of an evolution of the world population, it means that at about this time, before 2050, we could have a breakdown of the world population, which might shift from around 9 billion inhabitants to perhaps less than 1 billion inhabitants. It means that then this breakdown would mean that we would enter in an era of new Middle Ages. The civilization which we know would be destroyed globally, but as after the breakdown of the Roman Empire, there would be some islands which would remain, and then slowly the environment might recover and our civilization might be restored on a new basis. In the case of ecosystems, this has been illustrated by a graph. This graph illustrates what is found in ecosystems. What is observed in ecosystems, an ecosystem like a forest, is that the system tends to become more complex and more connected. The forest tends to grow, to become more complex and to become more connected. But as it becomes more complex and more connected, its resilience is falling. And at a certain time, when the resilience becomes too low, the system breaks down and there is this creative destruction, which is followed by a reorganization and a new starting point from a point which is lower in complexity but higher in resilience. And this picture has been developed by a scientist called Buzz Holling. And Buzz Holling has extrapolated this picture to human societies as a whole, and considering that such adaptive cycles can occur at different scales and at different time frameworks. Okay? And of course, perhaps this is something which might happen, and it means that when we would enter in a period of new Middle Ages, which we can consider corresponds to creative destruction for the world, there would be some communities which might remain, like in the Middle Ages, protected by big walls, by all kinds of defense systems. But at the same time, the system might reorganize itself on a new basis, and with the emergence of new values which now have been lost to a great extent, and which might become then the basis of a new civilization. And well, now this new civilization, perhaps we will certainly discuss that. I don't want to expand too much on this, because I'm not really able to describe it very precisely, but this is an interesting area of debate. What I say is just that I see it creative, pluralistic and open, and also inspired. And this is probably the end. Yes.
On t'entend plus là.
Flow. And for me, that is at the essence of the kind of leadership we're talking about. The ability to move from observing to presencing to prototyping and actualizing. So that's when Otto talks about having an open mind, an open heart, and also an open will in order to be able to do that.
It's okay for us.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, so shall we go with that?
Yeah.
Network, which is a network of grandmothers from all over the world, from different tribes, indigenous people, and they all received a vision, a dreams, or it was in their tradition, in their families, that one day they would have to meet together and to ally and to bring a new scenery, a new way of relating with people. So they
Barbara, we are very happy to be with you. And we are a little group in Austria working on designing a planet, as you know. And with Skype, we are very happy because we are with you. All the groups here.
Yes, you have to tell me what's happening. I'm very eager. I mean, there first.
Yes, the group see you on a big screen.
Yes. Yes. Well, I am, let's see, an evolutionary futurist and have been inspired all my life by the idea that we are living through an evolutionary shift and that there is a pattern in evolution that leads to crisis, and crisis leads to extinction or transformation. And so I've been researching what this crisis we're facing on Earth it could be leading toward, and I've actually seen it as the evolution of a co-creative, co-evolving humanity. That literally our crisis on Earth is the birth of an emerging human culture, an emerging universal human, I call it, and eventually a birth into the higher dimensions of universal intelligence and possibly other life in the universe, so that I have spent my life actually inspired by Teilhard de Chardin, first of all, with the idea that we're living, that the positive possibilities today have to do with the connectivity of that which is created. And that Teilhard's idea of a noosphere getting its collective eyes, the thinking layer of Earth connecting center with center, heart with heart, creativity with creativity, would lead to a collective awakening. And when I read that way back in the 60s, I felt very deeply that this was the purpose in life that I wanted to give my life to, is how do we connect the positive? How do we awaken collectively? Now, it was way back in 1966, I had a vision of what I call a planetary birth, which would be a time on Earth where the empathy, the spirituality, the healing, and the innovations would connect enough for us to realize we can make it through to the next stage of evolution without destruction of civilization. And I felt when I met Michel that the Design Me a Planet and the ideas of the evolutionary potential which gave birth to Design Me a Planet is very similar to the ideas that now are motivating me at this stage of my life. I have met with a producer, Stephen Dinan, who's the director of Shift Network, and together we're producing an event and a process called Planetary Birth and Planetary Awakening that will have a due date on December 22nd, 2012, where we are inviting people across the world to give their ideas, their gifts, and their creativity into a shared experience of what's working, what's being born in us now, seeing that as the birth a celebration of the new. While we're, on the one hand, the prophecies speak of the ending of a cycle on December 21st, I think a cycle is ending, not necessarily because of prophecies, but because of the nature of growth on this planet, and that therefore it's time for us to connect, celebrate, and participate in what's emergent. And I've always felt that converging what's creative could make the difference in a disastrous transition towards a more gentle transition. So we're here for the gentle transition to the next stage. And I felt very great affinity with Michelle and Elizabeth and Georgie and the Club of Budapest in Paris, where I met you all. And now that I'm being introduced to the Design the Planet creators, I'm feeling that we are very blessed to be in touch with each other and to see how we can co-create. And I've invited Michelle to be on a bonus call for one of my major courses on Shift Network, and then to see how you could participate in the planetary birth to celebrate what you're doing and what you understand about how to design a planet. So that's what I'd like to know.
Yes, thank you very much. So perhaps you can explain also what is your invitation in your book, perhaps, because that could be very interesting for the group to understand the connection between Design Me a Planet and actually your books.
Well, in my book, Birth 2012 and Beyond, there is, I just want to get it, and I'll have it right here.
Yes.
There's a section of the book. This book tells of my own personal journey to discover all this, and then it has a section called A Map to Cross the Gap.
Mm-hmm.
That has to do with the design of the planet, and the map to cross the gap is, first of all, my symbolic design is an evolutionary spiral and a wheel of co-creation.
Mm-hmm.
The spiral starts in the infinite, in the mind of God, and it goes through the formation of the universe, and then earth, life, animal life, human life, and sees us now going around the next turn in the spiral at the advent of the age of conscious evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Evolution is becoming conscious in us. And since we're affecting our own evolution, my question was, in this map, how do we affect it positively quickly enough to make a difference? So the structure of the map is a wheel that has every sector of human effort: health, education, economics, spirituality, arts, media, and our initiative is to identify and connect innovations that are working in each of those areas to see the emerging world. So that's what we're being called to enter into this process. We're inviting people to form their own hubs. When I was in Paris, and Michelle, you and Georgie invited me to speak to people who are interested in Paris, is to form a hub to be part of the celebration of what's working that you know of. And so we have now an event producer that we're calling people to participate in the planetary birth. It will be a 24-hour-day multimedia broadcast. And then, so I'm also saying here in the book that we have to create social synergy, which is the connectivity of that which is creative. And we need to activate this wheel of co-creation. So that would mean that we would begin in Design Me a Planet. You must be designing elements that you feel are working in different sectors of the wheel. So the call of the book is to participate in creating your own hub and identifying what you feel is your creative gift, and then putting it on birth2012.com, which is our website, and we have a place up there where you can place your own hub and your own work and find others. And in that sense, it seems to me something like designing a planet.
Yes, very, very good on that. It is a good example of what it is a good way to design your planet. I read your book and I like it very much because actually it is perhaps a book who just explain more in details what we wish to do. It is the same intention, so it is why we were so happy to make a bridge together.
Yes, yes. So I'd like to know from you, can some of you speak to me about how you are designing a planet and how we can cooperate?
Yes, so perhaps we can present each of us and then we can have an open dialogue about those different issues. Perhaps you will. So perhaps I am going to move and introduce the different person, and perhaps each of us can perhaps give his own vision of the possibility of a bridge. Also, I wanted to just ask you, how many dialogue circles do you have in the world right now? How many people participate to your process, actually? Barbara?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure right now. We have 60 or 70 circles, evolutionary circles. We have thousands of people who've taken the agents of conscious evolution. There are 200,000 people on the Shift network that are receiving all this information. We, when we do one of our calls, we'll get maybe 13 to 15,000 people listening in. And so and then we have the members of the welcoming committee who are our colleagues. They're in the book, like Jack Canfield and Jean Houston and Irvin Laszlo, and they collectively reach into hundreds of millions of people on internet. So as we're gathering ourselves, I would say it was amazing because of the outreach of some of these people, not all directly with our project, but that we are connecting with. I would say they're aiming at 1 billion people to reach via internet. For example, for International Peace Day, for the season of sustainability, for the birthday party. And Stephen himself is suggesting that we attempt to get 100 million people awakening simultaneously, having an experience of being connected and being part of a planetary emergence.
Yes.
So that's our goal, and I would say, we're just beginning to build our larger base.
And how you see how those different group of people are distributed in the world. Actually, you are speaking mainly about USA, or do you have group all over the world, or is it mainly in USA? Your audience.
More in the USA, but there are people in Australia, in England, certainly in France, in Toulouse, because you see, my Agents of Conscious Evolution, when we did a Conception Day celebration, there were 140 different countries who were participating and observing this. So we have a big outreach into different countries, but the organizational base is more in the US so far.
Okay.
To our circles, I was speaking a bit about the network of grandmothers, indigenous 13 grandmothers that you might know, and that has been for the first time teaching to the world through the Shift network. So actually I could feel it was a few years ago that this network was very important and crucial for the expanding of this ancestral knowledge, which is more my specificity, at least in this group of reflection. And also...
Yes, I know grandmother Flora de Mai.
Exactly. The one that I quoted her yesterday speaking about an idea of working on the noosphere from Argos. And so I find also this idea of noosphere so important and still quite far from most of people's views, that we have this power to work with our psychic level to implement, or at least to bring a kind of cocoon on the planet and help new projects emerging with more ease.
Yes.
So I have a great feeling also about the importance of people practicing advanced yoga or that kind of traditional practices that develop their third eye and their abilities to do so. And I'm also a yoga teacher, so I have this willing to bridge yogic communities around the importance to enjoy, to appreciate the powers that we are all developing now, and maybe there would be an opportunity with the SHIFT network to implement a kind of proposal of practice of designing a planet on an energetic field. So it would be a first point that I wanted to share, and the second one is about maybe also using a kind of network as this one and this birth process to help eco-villages to bridge in a better way and to really identify themselves as very advanced opportunities of creating a new organized life on the planet. I feel this.
I didn't understand. You said help. Who did you want to bring together with that? I missed that word.
Eco-villages network?
Villages?
Eco-villages.
Eco-villages, yes, absolutely. Eco-villages, yes.
And maybe not only the global eco-village network that is already active, but other kinds of that I am connected in Brazil with people working with other fields, higher intelligences, and that are guides to create international networks, and they really ask for help to expand and present their view to the world, so that other emerging initiatives can realize that they are part from a same program in a way. So this I can send you more information about it if you are interested. But
well, here's something I'd like to ask you. I have, once a week, we have a telephone call with Michael Olmsted, who is the event producer of the Birth 2012. And we are looking for, right now, how to mobilize all the different strands of endeavor, like eco-villages that are already doing this. And that possibly some of them could be celebrated during that 24-hour-a-day event, and could be placed on the map. And I'm getting an idea here that maybe you and others your colleagues might want to identify who you think needs to be communicated. And that we would then have a conversation with one of you, if you could write to me who you think should be represented, that you know of, like the eco-villages, and yourselves, so that we could begin to orchestrate what you know needs to be included.
Yeah, very good. And in the return movement, we can speak more about this network in Europe, or at least in France, where it is not so well known, and so that in that way we weave a widest field. So yeah, it's very interesting to connect.
Maybe the people in Design Me a Planet, starting with you and Michelle, could start identifying who you think is important to be and celebrated as part of the birthing day, you know, to help reveal this is being born, and we could have a call with one of you. Once you got this information and could email it to me, not just the eco villages, but whatever you think is important in the designing of the planet that is in your domain, and we could help communicate it further.
Yeah, that's great. We have a lot of contacts with indigenous peoples also in the Amazon, and some of them are not so well connected, and so yeah, we can really bring some connections. Michel,
Yes.
So I would like you to say what you feel is working in the world. What are the directions that humanity is going in and we could do more of? What do you feel needs to be communicated more fully through any way that we have to reach people? That's what I think we want. We want your highest vision and actually content of what's working toward a world that works. So out of designing a planet, what are the designs that you feel are important? Or the process. I mean, I think your process is very good. What do you feel the world should know that you could communicate to us that we could help people know more? You see? We're basically communicators here.
Yes, I think first I could say we can begin to speak a little about this with you right now, because that will give you a beginning of a feeling of what could be said on this.
Okay.
The first thing is, it seems that that is a good first step, because that connect your project with Design Your Planet. I think it is very important to bring all over the planet the idea that people can actually design the planet or discuss or have a dialogue around the issue of the planet. Because a lot of people just think they are hopeless. They think they cannot do it. They are not allowed even to think about planetary issues because they are not enough experts. They are just poor guys. And that is not true. Each human should now document about the future of the planet and begin to voice, to speak about the planet. So that is the first step. And that is a good idea to begin by this, because that makes a connection between your project and our project. Because
and how many people do you have, do you think, in your project of Design Me a Planet?
Oh, actually, Design Me a Planet is really a little project. What happened is the wording is great. So as yourself in phases this, Design Me Planet is speaking very well. We discover that we takes 1 year, even 2 years to find this wording, Design Me a Planet. And we are just at the beginning of the process to spread it. But it is true, it spread quite well, because and you are one of the first person. We had also Kimon, which is the previous ambassador of Canada to OCDE, who finds the idea also very good. But we are just on the beginning to spread Design Me a Planet. Actually, in France, I have been speaking about Design Me a Planet mainly to this little network that we developed through the Club of Budapest. And it is around 1,000.
Do you feel that when you speak on the phone with me and when you put your ideas out through Shift, do you want people to participate in the Design Me a Planet process?
Yes, I think it. Yes, of course. I think we can already prepare and say that we want travel and explain a little what is Design Me a Planet, and also create circles who can who began to work everywhere exactly as your circles. And actually, your process is very good for designing your planet, you know? I mean, your books is a good how to do books about designing your planet.
Do you think, for example, we could invite people who are forming circles to look at your material and put some of their ideas in? Could we do that?
Yes, definitively. I think we should. I think there are three things to do also for us. It is first make a. We have made a foundation in France, and now we are building the foundation in Austria. So we need also to build, and it is very important to build very quickly a foundation in USA about designing a planet, because we need to have a space, and we need to have a platform in USA who can develop designing a planet in USA, because it seems that USA is a place in the world where there are the most of cultural creative who are okay really to develop
creative,
cultural creative.
Yeah.
So we have to make a body in USA, and we can do it with you, with Herman Geer, a kind of foundation who develop designing a planet. Then we can bring in USA with you the methodology we began to do here in Austria, which is a one-week seminar with different days, more specifically dedicated to a thing to other, you know.
Yeah.
And also the mix of science, art, and philosophy inside, spiritual inside, may be interesting. So, and we can mix this with your own tools. That seems very relevant.
Yeah, I think the ideas are so much the same.
Yes.
And we have the spiral, and the wheel has at the center the spiritual and the personal contact with greater design of the universe, and then we have it reaching out into a global communion of souls, like ourselves. We're a communion right here. And then we go out into golden innovations or projects that work, and global co-creators who are masters in the field. So we're attempting to identify the gestalt, the emerging world that's already in our midst, and then to invite people to participate. And I think that you should be, I mean, I feel that you're a deep partner. I'm going to have to get off the phone in 5 minutes here.
Okay.
So I want to just make a plan for the next call on July, that I'm going to ask you, you know, what you're doing, what you see that should be part of the Birth 2012 celebration, what you would like to offer, and how you would like the Shift Network to expand what you're doing, because we'll reach thousands and thousands of people with this call. And then let's take it from there, because I don't think we can have a full-scale plan yet. But you're having your research conference, so you should be designing right there what you want to say to the people in the United States and other countries through this call.
Yes.
That's a very specific thing to look at right now.
Yes, I understand it, and I am very happy also to be on the group is hearing you. So we will work as a team also on this subject.
Wonderful.
Which is a very good thing, because I think that is typically a teamwork. It is very good to be a team.
Yeah.
So say what have been the project of your life, and then we can go ahead on the subject of designing a planet, Club of Budapest, and how you see also the situation after 1 year. Okay?
Right, all right. Well, my current projects are just putting on the internet a new book, which is called the Akasha Paradigm, Revolution in Science and Evolution in Civilization, the idea of new thinking, and based on science. And at the same time, I'm involved now with launching an online university, which we still have to give the name, but we are thinking of giving it the name of the Akasha World University. But this will be formal only in a couple of weeks. But it has been created jointly by the Giordano Bruno University and the Wisdom University of California. And so this is, it will start working at the beginning of next year. We are now preparing the whole curriculum. Then I am also involved with creating a film which is based on my ideas, and roughly more my ideas than my life, but it uses the autobiography that I published 2 years ago as a basis, and that also highlights the idea of new thinking, a new paradigm. So these are the major projects. I've also just finished a manuscript on 2020, the idea that after 2012, this is to be published in early 2013. After 2012, we have to think ahead. Not all the changes that we need are likely to have been made by the end of 2012, although we hope that some changes begin at least. So these are the main concerns. Let me then say a few words about how I see the situation.
Yes.
I do not see a significant change I do not see a radical change since last year. I see a further progression in development on both levels. On the one hand, on the positive side, there is a greater awareness of the problems of what is known unsustainability of the world, so that more people are realizing that business as usual cannot be maintained. And this is because of a number of both natural and man-made disasters and the prospects that are facing us if we would continue the same way. So the need for change is penetrating more and more people, more societies, more and more traitor the population. On the other hand, there is still the resistance to change among the leading decision makers, the power groups, the lobbyists. They're still maintaining a rather short-term perspective and trying to save the system from the imminent crisis or doing crisis management if a crisis comes. We have seen that with the financial crisis, ongoing financial crisis. We need that in Rio Plus 20. We need to see that in the meetings of the G20. There is a predominant sense that we should try to manage the system as well as we can. At the same time, if you talk to decision makers themselves, whether they are in business or in politics, it turns out that they are literally at sea. They do not know how to handle the situation. There is a more and more a desperate rush to do some last-minute patch-ups. But there is no real understanding or strategy of how to create a world that is more sustainable and more possible in the long term, even in the next few years. So that's a last-minute attempt to patch up the existing problems rather than looking really forward. So what all highlight is, to my, we need a much more holistic approach, whole systems approach. It's not enough to look at one problem or another problem. If you see that in the forest you see one another tree that is beginning to dry up, it's fine that you try to do something about it, but if you don't see the whole forest, more and more trees will dry up. In other words, you have a whole system. as well as its parts. This approach is very much calls for a new vision.
We have to really, really work with, not against, work with business, entrepreneurs, designers, scientists, technologists, bring these people together to create the fantastic products of the future. And that is one of the things I really like about designing the planet. Because what essentially Michel and other colleagues have been doing over the last few years is to focus on the positive impact we can make through design and creativity and innovation. And well,
this is where we come from.
Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is where people go when they want to start something new in the U.S. So go to New York if they want theater, culture, and Wall Street. Go to LA if they want movies and entertainment industry. And they have a new idea and they want to start something that's never existed before. They come to Silicon Valley. So we like that. It just has this great energy of just because it never existed, no problem. We can, people have the energy to make things happen that no one's ever seen before.
Well, one of the things where we think is very relevant to the conversation we're having with you is that the whole notion of designing something, designing plans, designing a new invention, innovating, we have a rich learning from our experience with Silicon Valley, and we're going to talk about how that relates to your task with design a little bit later. But there's a relationship between what's going on in Silicon Valley and what we believe the possibilities are for you and your group.
Thank you.
If we go to the next group,
Yeah.
This is the toughest companies in Silicon Valley. This was the Foundation for Global Community, and we think that that's where we first met you.
Yes, yes.
That's where we met, and it's a place, it was a nonprofit that we did a lot of work through for years and years. And
15 years.
And so that led us into some of the issues. We think you're that's some of the slides that people out of that, because Silicon Valley also not just about it, so, and technologies. And so can we go to the next one that had iceberg bit?
Yes.
Okay. This was part of what we worked on. And also part of what the foundation was about. So the idea was here's this iceberg where most of the assumption about the planet, world, and how it works, are the part there underneath the water. And like the base of the iceberg is worldview, like what we even think about the way the world works is often hidden from you, and what we see on the very surface are actions and the outcomes. And then if we go to the next slide, so those worldviews that are hidden, and I'm assuming that this is familiar for you guys, that we don't, for some groups it might be new, but that worldview, humanity evolved in terms of, we started out, that the world began as a very magical place, full of spirit, people connected to nature.
Lisa, sorry, but the connection is not too good, so perhaps we can just close the video and we will hear you better, because we have difficulty actually to hear you just right now. And perhaps we can, yes.
Ça va, non?
Okay.
On peut essayer de continuer.
Yes, we hear you a bit better, and the most important is that we see the slide now.
Good. Do I need to repeat anything from before? Should I, or is it okay?
I think it is okay, and we hear you a lot better, so it's perfect.
Good.
Perhaps
so this is how the world views
I'm going to close also my video, actually,
okay.
as this I think the connection will be better. Okay,
Good.
It is a lot better. Okay.
Okay. So how our worldviews have evolved. So it began, the world was a magical place, and then we introduced science in our very rational world and developed a world with separate parts where only the fittest would survive. And now we're moving and all creating together this third worldview. So if you go to the next slide that says Worldview 3.0,
yes.
this is, my guess is that this is very familiar to your group. I just liked the way that this was what the foundation put into words, and I think it made it very simple, because it can be very complicated to think about what's our worldview. It's so big. And that the way that they framed it was that everything is interconnected, where the survival of each part depends on the survival of the whole, and that the recognition that humans are part of an interconnected, interdependent, larger living system. So when we work on design of a planet, we tend to give as design assignments that these are the conditions that we take for granted. And it's just nice, it captures it in a quick sentence. 2 quick sentences. So if we go, does that make sense? Does that seem familiar for you guys?
This is back to
yes.
a little bit part of our introduction still to you, which says the kind of topics, the kind of issues that you're raising around designing the planet, the world for the third millennium, are things that we have thought about together with you as well. You know, we're in the same conversation with you now, and we just wanted to show you that we're related in some form.
Yes, thank you very much. That is very good because it teaches the first day and the first interview, so it's perfect as an opening.
Very good.
So if you go to the next slide, it just says strategies. Number one, we wanted to talk with you a little bit about strategies.
So a strategy for within that worldview 3.0, right? So we're going to give you a view to how the strategies for this worldview 3.0 are different from the kind of strategies that we have lived with for the last 200 years, you know, in our industrial age.
And the second one, if you go to the next slide, just says 2 innovation tools.
Yes.
And if you have time, you'll have to tell us how much time you have. We'll show you kind of one of our favorite strategies and one of our favorite innovation tools. But if we really need to stop, you can let us know. We may not get to the innovation tools.
So the point of both of these concepts, or both these frameworks, is to take it from the conceptual, you know, how do we recognize that we're in this shifting reality as humanity, where we must do something is more concrete in terms of what we may actually do now. So we're moving now from understanding about interconnectedness, about all those things, to saying what are the fundamentals to doing things. So if you go to the next slide, we were very, very happy.
The one that says as designers.
As designers. We're now going to talk to you about our friend Bill McDonough. Bill McDonough has been very connected. You know, we've been very connected with Bill for the last 20 years, and in fact, we were just with him 4 days ago.
Yeah, in this last week. So that's why we thought it would be interesting to talk with you about his work as one of the design strategies we work with.
And when you think about when you talk about designing a planet, this is a man who has given that concept, this idea of designing a planet and designing for a planet, as much thought as I know of anybody, you know, who has ever thought about this as a fundamental concept in the U.S. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about his thinking. So, you know, he says, as designers, we're responsible for our design strategy and its consequences, whether intended or not. So his fundamental proposition is, once we recognize that designers, everything that live with as human beings, that we have designed where we are, and that how we think about that and what our design strategy for those things is fundamental to the way to the world we create. So very aligned with your view about designing your planet. So here's a quick story. It's real. What he means by design strategy and its consequences. If you go to the next picture, it says existing. You see the picture? Exist. Are you with me?
Yes.
It's a picture of a landscape that says existing.
Yes.
So Bill was asked by the Chinese government to look at this landscape and to say, and to show this Chinese who gave him this assignment, what a city looked like for 10 million people in this space, right?
Yes.
That we're going to have to build a city in that space for 10 million people. What would it look like? What should it look like from your perspective? And he came back, showed them this picture and said, this is existing. And then he, in the second picture, the next picture, and he said, and this is what I propose that city of 10 million people to look like. Back to the original concept of saying design strategy, it is a complete mind shift when you say design a planet where where human beings design something, design a city for 10 million people, it fundamentally should look, it should basically say the mental, biological realities started with. And now you can go to the next picture.
Which shows a bit how he would accomplish that.
And so that's the point, that as we ourselves, play ourselves as design.
Die Pop-Art-Superstar Andy Warhol hat der Franzose Michel Saloff-Coste in den 1970er Jahren in New York kennengelernt. Von der Kunstikone inspiriert, brachte Michel Saloff-Coste die Pop-Art nach Frankreich.
Je suis parti à New York et le deuxième nach dem Kunststudium in Paris reiste ich nach New York und lernte zufällig Andy Warhol in einem Restaurant kennen. Ich blieb 3 Monate lang und ließ mich von der damals neuen Kunstströmung Pop-Art inspirieren.
Die Werke des Pariser Multitalents zeigt derzeit das Papiermachermuseum in Steirermühl. Michel Saloff-Coste ist nämlich auch ein Wirtschaftswissenschaftler und Philosoph. Farbenfrohe Bilder und spontane Porträts sind Saloff-Costes Markenzeichen. Ein Kontrast dazu sind die ruhigen Malereien von Bernard Verrier und David Gruber. Das
See everybody and say hello.
Yes. We are very few, but very motivated.
Well, that's great. So are we. All right, look at that.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hello.
Aloha. Aloha.
So you have seen everybody.
We're in Hawaii.
If you wish, each person can present himself. He can come here. You see me well?
Yes.
We see you very well.
Each person can present himself. We will not do it every time, but
hello, my name is Michel, I come from Paris. I am the General Secretary of Design Your Planet. And I have a PhD in computer science. I work in finance and social development. I'm very interested in the integral approach and ecology and many subjects. I am also involved in the Integral University in Paris, and I'm very happy to see you and hear you on Skype.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Michel.
Hello, Lisa. Hello, Hamad.
It's.
We talked already once with Hamad. I'm the part of the Austrian-French bridge, and I'm taking care of the group here, and I'm also founding member of Design Your Planet. So nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
Hello, I'm Thomas. I'm a creative member of Design Your Planet, and I'm working on political issues, institutional issues, and monetary issues.
Excellent. Very good. Nice to meet you.
Hello.
o'clock at night here.
Wow, okay. Here it's 10 in the morning, as you know. Also, I am Solène, I am from France as well, and I am teaching yoga. This is my main job, but I also studied economics in a business school in Paris, and I traveled a lot in the Amazon, and I worked a lot with the tribes over there, and I feel very concerned about the future of our planet, so it's a great joy to feel everybody motivated and have this opportunity to know you better.
Excellent.
Hello, good morning. My name is Alexandre Rocher. I have been working for many years in applied research in the area of energy and sustainable development. And now I have left this job and I'm involved in teaching in this area. And also I'm animating a think tank in France about energy and sustainable development, and also very interested and involved in future studies, and therefore I'm quite interested by this project, Designing a Planet, and I met Michel already some years ago.